Hey. All right, so we are still working on introduction to functions. In this lesson, we are going to understand input versus output, and we're going to create a typical table of values. These table of values that we could then plot on a graph. So this is all fairly basic. It's stuff that you probably have already known. You just maybe haven't had it explicitly taught to you. So just putting some words to this concept and to this concept of graphing in this way is what we're going to be focusing on. So first of all, you will see this equation we have here. We have y is equal to 10x plus 5. We're going to start to see a lot of equations in this format in this module as well as our next two modules. This is a linear equation. Technically, it's also a linear function, and we'll talk about why it's a linear function next lesson. Not next video, next lesson. All right, first of all, we are going to look at these words input and output. These two words refer to parts of this equation. Input refers specifically to our x value, and our output refers specifically to our y value. When we look at an equation, it's important that we understand what is considered an independent variable and what is considered a dependent variable, which you're going to be looking at in our next lesson. Ooh, crap. I said it was going to be your next lesson that you talk about functions more specifically and what they are. That's lesson 3. Sorry, not lesson 4.2. It's lesson 4.3. I wasn't thinking. All right, so either way, input versus output. If we're looking at this equation here, it's important that we understand what is an independent variable versus a dependent variable. Our input is another way of also saying independent variable, meaning it's something that we can predict. It's something that we have control of. We have control of putting a value in for x. Technically, we have control of putting a value in for y, but we have to do a whole lot more work for it to figure out what it is. But in terms of how this equation is set up, anything I put in here for x, I can solve whatever is on the right-hand side of it, and it will equal my output, which is kind of nice. So in terms of these numbers that right here, I could put a -2 in for x, and I can figure out what comes out of this equation for the y value. So it just sort of gives me a way to sort of predict or like look at the future of this equation. Output is another way that we can another thing that we can call a dependent variable. Whatever comes out of this equation is dependent upon what I put into it. So whatever I put here for whatever numbers, that is going to dictate what is going to come out of it. Now this function or this equation is going to tell me that I have to multiply by 10 and add 5, and that's going to be a very specific pattern just for this equation that I could then graph, and I can look at what it looks like in terms of graph, what it looks like in terms of coordinate pairs, and that sort of thing. So what you're going to be practicing in this unit is not just looking at equations and talking about inputs versus outputs, but you are actually going to be calculating inputs versus outputs. So what I always suggest people do is start out with these 5 core numbers: -2, -1, 0, 1, 2. And what I want you to do is I want you to create a table. You're going to have a table of inputs or x values or independent variables versus outputs or y values or dependent variables. And you're going to, I suggest you start out with these core numbers, -2, -1, 0, 1, 2, because we can see what happens with positive numbers if they're put into this equation. We can see what happens with 0 if it's put into this equation. And we can see what happens with 2 negative numbers if we put them into this equation. That's really helpful because you can sort of see a tendency with an equation like this. You could add more numbers in the positive direction or in the negative direction after you see this all work out, depending on if you're seeing like this graph skewed too high or too low on a coordinate plane. Like say this graph ends up looking like way up here and it's not actually on the coordinate plane with any of these numbers that we graph here. That's okay if that's the case. That means that we might want to have some more negative numbers to bring it down into this like 10 by 10 graph that we typically create, and that's all right. So let's put some numbers in here, and this is what I expect of your work for this particular unit. If I put a -2 in here, I truly want you to write y is equal to 10 times negative 2 plus 5. And then I want you to solve it. 10 times negative 2 is negative 20 plus 5 is negative 15. So you get an output of 15. That means we have an ordered pair here of an x value of negative 2 and a y value of negative 15. That is our resulting coordinate pair. We can do the same thing with negative 1. We're going to put negative 1 in for x. So we get y is equal to 10 times negative 1 plus 5. 10 times negative 1 is negative 10 plus 5 is negative 5. Cool? And we can keep doing this, and we can keep creating ordered pairs. So I got negative 1, negative 5 for my next ordered pair. I could put 0 in here. Y is equal to 10 times 0 plus 5. 10 times 0 is 0 plus 5 is 5. So my next coordinate pair, 0, 5. And I can keep on going. I'll finish this up really quick. Put a 1 in there. 10 times 1 is 10 plus 5 is 15. So I have 1, 15 for my next ordered pair. And y is equal to 10 times 2 plus 5 is equal to 25. So 2, 25. And so I've now created 5 ordered pairs that I can now graph onto a coordinate plane. So negative 2, negative 15 is going to be like maybe way down there. And negative 1, negative 5, we're looking at maybe something here. And 0, 5 here. And we are going to see a linear equation or a line slowly develop. I haven't had my practice drawing lines this year for you guys. But we'll see our line slowly develop. And I could even plot the last one of 2, 25, and it'll probably be way up there. Either way, I want you to practice creating some linear functions, or I want you to practice putting inputs into a function or an equation and finding out the outputs and creating this sort of table of values. The next video is going to be one more practice of this exact scenario, and it'll be a little bit more fleshed out, and that'll be exciting for everybody. You're welcome to watch it. Bye.